What is going on, Pats Nation? You guys already know who it is. Patriots Club here, back with another video, and in this one, I gotta talk about rumors that are going around about one of my favorite players on this entire team from top to bottom, and that is Kendrick Bourne, and the rumors going around that he could potentially be traded this offseason. Now, rumors came out, or I should say reports rather, came out that the Patriots are receiving a lot of calls about their wide receivers. They're getting trade interest from their wide receivers. This is something that I either posted a video about already or I'm going to be posting a video about shortly. With that being said, the Patriots are receiving trade calls for somebody like Kendrick Bourne. And look, this does make a lot of sense. Kendrick Bourne fits a lot of different systems in the NFL. He has a very, very reasonable contract for a wide receiver that put up over 800 yards last year in his first year in the system. And due to the slow start, his quietness this offseason in OTAs, training camp, minicamp, the preseason, and some issues he's had, that has sparked up the conversation about Kendrick Bourne potentially being traded. And Greg Bedard actually came out and said himself that he 100% believes that this is something the Patriots are considering and something that they are potentially looking into. Now, like I said, Kendrick Bourne has been very quiet this offseason, specifically in training camp and, these joint practices and preseason. He's been one of the least targeted players so far throughout training camp and these joint practices. Now, it's not to say that he hasn't made any plays. Like today against the Raiders, he had a touchdown late in the joint practice with the Raiders from Mac Jones. It's not to say he hasn't caught any passes. It's not to say he hasn't caught any touchdowns. It's not to say he hasn't looked good at all or had his moments. He's just been very quiet and has not caught as many passes as a lot of these other tight ends, running backs, wide receivers. And then to put the icing on the cake, as we all know, you probably already heard this, joint practice against the Panthers, Kendrick Bourne, first day of joint practice, was sent to the sideline by the ref due to a offensive snap, due to an equipment issue. From what I heard, it had something to do with his pads or his socks. Just overall, it was an illegal equipment issue that you're not allowed to have due to NFL rules. He was sent to the sideline and wasn't allowed to participate in that snap. And Bill Belichick reportedly went off on Kendrick Bourne because of this. Kendrick Bourne was not happy. He was not talking to the media the same following practices. And as we all know, that same day that Bill Belichick barked at him due to that equipment issue, shortly after, he was a part of that fight on day one of joint practice with the Panthers that did get him kicked out of practice. Because of that, he was starting to roll with the second team offense for the rest of joint practice with the Panthers. He did not suit up, guys. It's not even that he was present but didn't play. He did not even suit up against the preseason game against the Panthers. And the Patriots had a lot of starters in there. They had Jonnu Smith. They had Devontae Parker. They had Mac Jones. They had Damian Harris. They had their starting offense in there for quite a bit. And Kendrick Bourne was not a part of that, which went to even further the speculations that the Patriots could potentially look to trade him. Overall, I think this was not ideal for Kendrick Bourne, and like I said, I think that this was really just the icing on the cake, but I'm not worried about his lack of production here in the offseason because even last year, he wasn't a guy that was necessarily going off. He's one of those guys that just does not produce when it comes to training camp. He's an on-the-field player. And this is a real thing, guys. This isn't something to be concerned about. There's just some players that pop off during training camp and preseason, and some players that just don't show up during the offseason, mini camp, training camp, preseason games, but just pop out during the regular season. I mean, how many times have we seen this? Somebody like N'Keal Harry, who was always fantastic in the offseason, in practice, but then when it came to the regular season, did not produce at all. To me, I don't look too much into him not playing in that preseason game against the Panthers, him not suiting up. The way I see this, it was a punishment. Bill Belichick does not do well with fighting. Bill Belichick does not do well with being ejected. Bill Belichick does not do well with players not following the rules, especially when it comes to something as stupid as not being able to play because you're trying to look drippy. You're trying to have your equipment look cool. So the way I see it, this was just more of a punishment for Kendrick Bourne, and Belichick saying, you need to get your act together because I'm not having it. Hey, you had a great 2021 season, but if you want to have a great 2022 season under the system and produce with Mac Jones, well, you're going to have to start behaving, because if not, you're going to start, one, not being at practice, but two, you're going to start rolling with the second team. So now that we talked about the reports and really the rumors and the speculation and the reasoning behind these reports, I want to get into what I think is going to happen. And overall, I don't think Kendrick Bourne's going anywhere. I don't think he's going to be traded. I think the media is blowing this up. They're looking too much into this. I absolutely could not believe my eyes when I was reading all these reports going around, because this was a big story for the Patriots, that Kendrick Bourne could be traded. I mean, we're talking about fights with the Panthers. We're talking about preseason games. We're getting ready for the start of the season, and the biggest storyline going around this team was Kendrick Bourne potentially being traded. I think this would just absolutely be a terrible move by the New England Patriots. I just don't think there's any sense behind it. The Patriots have decent depth at wide receiver. I think they have good starting caliber wide receivers, but trading Kendrick Bourne is not the right move. He's a very cost-effective deal for the Patriots and any team around the league, which is why he's getting a lot of attention from other teams around the league. I mean, he signed a 3-year, $15 million contract with the Patriots for a starting caliber wide receiver, again, who put up 800 yards for the Patriots this past season. That is very cost effective. But to me, I would trade somebody like Nelson Agholor before I would trade somebody like Kendrick Bourne, just because Kendrick Bourne fits this system like a glove. Kendrick Bourne fits this system a lot better than somebody like Nelson Agholor, who, hey, Nelson Aguilar's been popping out so far for the Patriots this offseason, but again, there's players that pop out in the offseason but can't produce in the regular season. Last year, Agholor did not perform well for the Patriots in the regular season, but Kendrick Bourne did. And for me personally, I'm going to take what I saw from players in the regular season and base them off of that and not necessarily how they're performing on the offseason. What you also have to understand is that the Patriots also are losing Tyquan Thornton for a few weeks to start the regular season, and potentially even more depending on how he develops and what Belichick decides to do with him. So the Patriots are already losing a little bit more depth with him, not to mention the fact that you have Devontae Parker, who is constantly getting injured and dealing with injury history. Then there's not to mention the tight end position with somebody like Hunter Henry, who's been dealing with injury and has an injury history, and Jonnu Smith, who also has a little bit of an injury history. The Patriots need somebody like Kendrick Bourne, who, again, you know what you're getting out of him. He's very cost effective, and he's Mac Jones' favorite guy. That is Mac Jones' go-to guy right there. Him and Mac Jones have a great connection. Overall, I think Mac Jones and Kendrick Bourne, that is your quarterback to wide receiver one. Am I saying that Kendrick Bourne's wide receiver one on the depth chart? No, that's not what I'm saying at all. But Kendrick Bourne for Mac Jones is the Julian Edelman for Tom Brady. I think it would be a horrific move by Bill Belichick to get rid of somebody like Kendrick Bourne for all the good he brings. I just overall believe that what you're going to get compensation-wise back for somebody like Kendrick Bourne is not going to outweigh the production and the value that he's going to give you if he is on your team. Some other good news, too, is that Bill Belichick did say he expects all his players to make that trip to Las Vegas, including Kendrick Bourne, and Kendrick Bourne did. So I do expect Kendrick Bourne to suit up for the Patriots against Las Vegas. Again, we're not able to hear as much information because, this is in Las Vegas. This is not in New England, so we're not hearing as much as we did with joint practice against the Panthers. But so far, we heard that today, joint practice day 1 against the Raiders, that Mac Jones and Kendrick Bourne had a connection in the end zone for a touchdown. He made the trip. He's expected to suit up in the preseason. So overall, I just think that last week was just a bad week for Kendrick Bourne, and that he was just getting punishment, and that these trade rumors, it's just media looking into storylines. But what are your guys' thoughts on this? Would you trade Kendrick Bourne? If you would, what would you look for in compensation? And if you wouldn't, let me know why you wouldn't. I think I know why, but just let me know anyway. Of course, remember to like this video and, of course, subscribe to the channel for all of your New England Patriots news. Like always, I appreciate you guys for watching, and go Pats.